Hello everyone, good morning. This is Evaristo message here. Today we are going to be doing common operations, array of operations in JavaScript. This is a way to test my streaming setup. For a long while I have not streamed since I relocated to Canada. I thought let me test my streaming setup today and see how it does. Today we are going to be working with arrays in JavaScript. We are going to be looking at the common operations you can do in array. So we're going to be looking at push, we are going to be looking at pop, shift and shift, splice, sort, map, filter, and then the last one we're going to be looking at will be reduce. So without further ado, let's get to this. Now array are like ubiquitous in JavaScript. A lot of people get to if you ever work in JavaScript, it's likely that most of the first operations you do, and in every day of your life, you get to work with array. So this stream is just going to be a stream of consciousness kind of stream, because I really don't have anything prepared. I just wanted to test my setup. So if you find this useful, do like, subscribe to our channels, because we plan to do a lot more. Thank you. So let's get to it. We're going to first declare an array here. Let's not use const, because we might want to redeploy it as we go. Numbers equals to an array of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, that will be our array. The first operation we're going to do is the push. Now the push operation is a way to add elements to the end of an array. Right? Add elements to the end of an array. So if you need to add a new element to the end of an array in JavaScript, all you need to do is just say numbers dot push, and you could add one or two things or three things at the same time. It really doesn't matter. So all you need to do is to separate them with a comma. 5. We don't have 11 there, and then 12. And then when you add that, we can reprint numbers, and you see we had 5 elements in our numbers array before. Now you can clearly see that we've been able to add 5, we added 11, we added 12, and now we have 8 elements in our array. That's one way of adding elements to your array. But know that if you use push, it will add those elements to the end of the array and not to the beginning of the array. Alright, that's push. Now let's move on to on shift. On shift is to add one or more elements to the beginning of an array. So when you it does the same thing as push, but instead of adding those elements to the end of the array, it adds those elements to the beginning of the array. So it is exactly the same. You can add multiple elements at the same time. The difference is that it adds those elements to the beginning of the array instead of to the end of the array. Okay, so when we say numbers dot on shift, let's add 2 elements at this time. Let's add the number. We don't have 1, we don't have 2, so when we do it this way, we now have 10 elements in our array, right? We now have 10 elements in our array, and you see that whereas we had 6 as the starting elements, now we have 1 and 2 before 6. So we added 2 elements to the array, and they were added to the beginning of the array. So remember the difference between shift and the difference between a shift and push is that whereas push adds those elements to the end of the array, on shift add those elements to the beginning of the array. That's the basic difference. There's no other difference. Okay, now let's look at Splice. You can also now Splice is a peculiar case, right? Because you can use Splice to add an element to an array, and at the same time use it to remove elements from an array, right? So you could use it to add elements somewhere in the middle of the array or at any index in the array, right? So a way to do that will be let's add so what we want to do is the first thing is to get the starting index. Let's do 2. The second thing is what do you want to delete? Do you want to delete anything? I really don't want to delete anything, so I add 0 there. Then let's add the actual elements we want to add to this array. But now instead of adding numbers to this array, I actually want to add letters to this array. So I will do A, B, and then we'll do that. At the end, it can return numbers. And you see our numbers now have 12 elements, and starting at index 2. Remember, array is a 0-based index, which means 1 is 0, 2 is 1. See, sorry about that. 1 is 0, 2 is 1, A is 2, right? So we specified that we wanted to add an element from the start index of 2 without deleting, and add. So we were able to add A and B to those elements. Now we'll come back to Splice when we want to start removing elements from an array. But at this point, you can remember you can use Splice to add an element anywhere in the array as long as you specify a valid index, and you can use Splice to remove elements from the array. We'll come back to removing elements from an array. Okay, thank you. Now let's start removing elements from an array. Now to start, the first thing we'll consider is pop. Pop, right, just like push, removes elements from the end of an array. Okay, so we simply do numbers. Let's pop the last element of the array. Pop and that will give us 12. We've removed that element from the array, and that element is the number 12. And when you print out pop, you see, when you print out numbers, you see that the element 12, the value 12, is no longer in the array. Another way to remove an element from the array, just like we have shift on shift, we also have shift. So But the difference once again is that while you use pop to remove an element from the end of an array, you use shift to remove an element from the beginning of the array. So if we want to remove the number 1 from the beginning of this array, all we simply have to do is to shift, and that will give you the number 1. It returns the number 1, but when you print out numbers, you see that 1 is no longer in the array. That's as simple as it can get. So once again, the next one we want to consider is the same splice. Splice will remove an element based on the index you gave it and the number of elements you want to delete. When we run splice before, we used it to add element to the array. We gave it a starting index. We gave it a delete count of 0. I didn't want this to actually delete anything, and then we gave it items to add, right? But in this case, if we want to delete A and B that we added with splice, all we simply have to do is do numbers dot splice, give it a starting index, which in this case is if we want to remove the A and the B that we inserted with splice before. In this case, we just give it an index of 1, and then we specify that we want to remove 2 elements. That's all you need to do, and splice will return those 2 elements to you, like you see here. And when you print numbers, you'll see that those elements have been removed from the array. So these are common operations in using array in JavaScript. So the next thing we want to do is to look at some complex array operations, what we call higher order functions in JavaScript. Such higher order functions include sort, map, filter, and reduce. So the best way to get into it, the best way to explain this is to get into it. Now, sorting an array is one of the most common tasks that you will perform during your program career. A lot of algorithms, a lot of operations require you to sort an array, and the sort method sorts the array in place, which simply means that it doesn't create a copy of the array. It sorts your original array and returns that sorted array. So basically, we have 2, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 5, 11. They are out of sort. I could basically, if I want to sort this immediately, I could basically do this, the sort, but unfortunately, sorting an array of numbers gives you weird results, right? So if I do this, you see it starts with 10, 11, 2, 5, because it is using the first character to do the comparison and not the whole number. To be able to sort an array of number properly, you give it what we call a compare function. A compare function, you declare a function such as function compare that takes 2 values, that takes 2 parameters, and then you compare it. If A is greater than B, return true or false. If B is greater than A, return true or false, something like that. So in this case, we can simply just return or if A is less than B, s return return 1 will just return 0 if they are equal. So that's the compare function. So in this case, if we say numbers dot sort just give it the compare function, and we see that our numbers are sorted properly. There are various ways to define this compare function. You could actually do a minus b, return a minus b. Just various ways to do that compare function, but I'm showing you one of the simplest way now. So I guess the next operation we want to take a look at is the array.map. The map method creates a new array with the results of calling a provided function on every element in the array. That sounds weird. Now, what I'm basically saying is that when you call an array, when you call a map operation on an array, a function that you supply to that map, a callback that you supply to that map, is called on every element of the map, of the array. Excuse me. So in essence, what it does is that if you have an operation that if you want to multiply every element of an array by 2, you could use map to do exactly that. So what does that mean? I could just say const double equals to numbers dot map times 2. What this does is that it just returns for every element in numbers, every number in numbers, so every element in numbers, we just multiply it by 2, and it returns it and assign the result of that operation to top doubles. So if we press enter and then print out doubles, you see all our elements has been multiplied by 2. 2 times 2 is 4, 2 times 5 is 10, 6 times 2 is 12, 7 times 2 is 14, and so on and so forth. That's the map operation. Map is very powerful. You could use it in a variety of ways. If you're a React developer, I bet you that you use map constantly and every day. So the next element we want to consider is the next operation we want to consider is filters. Filter is another inbuilt method that creates a new array with all the elements that pass the test. The test is provided by a callback, right? Any element that evaluates to true is kept. Any element that evaluates to false is removed from the new array. So that means if we wanted to remove, if we had an array, we have an array. If we want to remove every element that is divisible, that is not divisible by 5, we could actually do that easily, right? So we could do const divisible by 2. Let's just do divisible by 2. We'll do numbers dot filter number, just like we did with map, Then we do number modulo 2 equals to 0, and that's all we need to do. Now if we print divisible by 2, you see only numbers that are divisible by 2 are returned. But okay, so I think this might be wrong. Okay, no, that's actually correct. It is not wrong. I was looking at doubles, whereas I should be looking at numbers. Yes, that's correct. So that is filter. Anything that evaluates to true and false can be used as the compare function for a filter. So you could do const greater than 5 equals to numbers dot filter So if you print greater than 5, it gives you every number that is greater than 5. You see filter, map, sorts, all those all the operations we've considered today are very powerful operations, and they help you, they serve as building blocks for building more complex and more powerful software. So the last operation we're going to consider today is the reduce operation, another powerful operation. So the reduce operation takes two parameters, right? It has a callback function that takes two parameters, and you can use an accumulator and the current the initial value, right? It's called a reducer function, which is the callback. It has set 4 parameters actually. You have an accumulator, you have the current value, you have the current index, and you have the source array. So if an initial value is provided, then the accumulator will be equal to the initial value, and the current value will be equal to the first element in the array. So you can use reduce to do a lot of operations, right? For example, we have the numbers. As if we want to sum all the numbers in our arrays together to give a one value, we could do const sum. Just a minute. Reduce equals to numbers that reduce. So we have the function, we have the accumulator, and we have the current value. Then we can simply return accumulator plus the current value. Alright, once we return the accumulator and the current value, then we need to supply the initial value, and that's all we need to do. So when you print as sum, it gives you 58. Yeah, and when if we do this, 4 plus 10, that's 14, plus 12, that's 26, plus 14, that is 40. So that gives you the sum of 58. Okay, so guys, thank you very much. Subscribe to this channel. A lot more videos are going to be coming after this. I'm going to take the time to make more quality video. Like I said, this was a test of my setup, and since everything is working fine, everything is working well, I'm glad you were able to join me today. I will have more videos coming up. Subscribe, like, and subscribe, and thank you very much.